Good morning, folks. We are back with Paul Diebolt at Diebolt Machine. I always enjoy catching up with Paul, and for folks out there that are getting started in this trade, find someone that in your community that's tied in with machine work, sort of a type of mentor, or a guy like Paul who's been around the block and has a level of wisdom that's been for sure helpful. And it's been nice a few times to pay the favor back to help you out too. First thing we started talking about was this part you got here.
Yeah, this is a rim off a big John Deere tractor, one of the big four-wheel drive things, and one of the wheels came loose and wallered all the bolts out. So we're going to have to locate all these holes because we're going to put helicoils in there.
If they let those holes all get wallered out, you can't just chase those existing holes because the pattern won't match up, right? You'll have to interpolate it out.
I'm going to machine back here so we have a nice flat surface to sit on. I mean, we could put blocks here and set it on here because there's only one surface here that's machined.
That's machined, right, with that
that's
grooving, but the rest of this is just a cast?
Yeah, that's right. And if we skim this here, then we can sit it on here, but I want to hone this out because it's got a taper in there before it fits on the axle.
Got it. What am I looking at here? I've got 3 threaded holes, but then
there's a weight that goes on the back.
Okay.
Kind of like a counterbalance.
Okay.
So apparently there's something that causes a counterbalance, out of balance condition, and you bolt that weight on the back of this wheel before you put the rim on.
But that's for the whole balancing the whole tractor. Not the wheel's not turning fast enough to have
that's
wheel
right.
balancers.
That's right. It has something in there that's out of balance in the function of the tractor, and they have to put this weight on the outside.
Huh.
So they have 3 tapped holes here to put it through, and then they got 3 holes coming from the other side you can put it through.
Interesting.
So you can put it on without taking the wheel off, or you can put it on
I see. Okay.
You know, but these holes here are where these go to jack it off the taper.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So it pushes up against the plate in the back, so it'll pop off the taper. So you don't have to. And somebody has taken a hammer, and instead of using it, I guess they didn't know what those were for, and they started beating on it. So it has some dents on it. If you run your finger around here, it feels lumpy, but you can see where the rim has been resting in spots here, and it's been working because the bolts came loose.
Right. How do you hone out this?
I'm just going to use a piece of emery on it because I don't want to change the size. If you know anything about tapers, boy, this is a steep one. If they're a shallow taper, boy, you can make it move on a lot really far, too far, and then it might bottom out on something here, and then it won't lock up.
Got it.
So you don't want to take too much off of there.
So then you're gonna have this on the CNC mill for the helicoil, and then you're gonna have it on a lathe to
just skim it, just to do some basic work in a manual machine. It's not gonna be that big a deal.
Got it.
But these waller out because the wheel comes loose. Somebody's not paying attention to whether the wheels are tight, and it kind of reminds me. I used to have an English sports car, an Austin Healey, and you have to watch these type of things when you're trying to refurb this like this, because years ago when I got this car, I went down to I was living in Maryland at the time, and this guy was in Virginia, and he was known to be a really good British car mechanic. Okay, and I went down there, and man, I'd never seen so many exotic British sports cars,
cool.
Lotus and Aston Martin. I mean, I was like, wow, this is really something. And somebody sent me down there to look at that car, and he told me, he said, this is a good car. You want to take care of this car. It was in Virginia, and there was no rust on that car, no rust. And these cars are known for falling to pieces in salt,
Yeah.
But I did know at the time that when you buy a British car, you're committing to doing something
some maintenance
all the time, because these cars are they're just built that way. I don't know what it is about them. It's just you have to be in love with a wrench. Because anytime you drive it, you put it in the garage and you get the wrench out because something needs fixed. And there's another story connected to that. I had a TR6 too, which is a Triumph. And one time I was driving down the road, and all of a sudden the car started filling up with smoke. And if you've been around those, the wiring stinks in them cars, and it stunk all right because it was burning the wiring up. So I pulled off the road and rolled the window down so I could breathe, and got out of the car, and I thought, now what am I going to do? And it sat there for a few minutes, and the smoke cleared away. I thought, I wonder if it'll run. So I got in, started up, and drove down the road. When I got home, I looked underneath the dash, and all the wiring was fused together. But it never did that again, so I just left it alone.
Serious?
Yeah. But the Austin, this guy was telling me that it needs rims.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that's no big deal. And he says, you don't just put rims on it. I said, why? He said, because what happens is the hubs, you can buy those cars, you used to be able to buy those cars. This is a 66 with discs or wire. And when you buy it with wire wheels, they put a hub on there where the lug bolts are.
Okay.
And it has a spline on it, which is tapered.
Oh.
Okay, so that way
Good
you got
grief.
that spinner nut on the end of that spline, and you can knock that spinner nut loose and just put the wheel on,
Yeah.
put the spinner nut on.
So no lug nuts, you have a tapered
Spinner.
spline.
Yeah, and then when you got a big spinner, a chrome spinner nut, and of course you got a special hammer for the chrome spinner nuts because you don't want to bruise that thing all up because
Right.
it's really pretty. He says, you can't just replace the wheels on this car. And I said, why is that? He said, because when they start coming loose, and that's what they do, you'll go down the road and you step on the brakes and the wheels will go, you can feel it jerking because it's moving on the spline. And he says on a tape, they put it on a taper so it'll lock up and it won't be loose, which is really nice. But he says once they get loose, you got to replace all of it.
Oh my God.
You got to take the splines off, throw them away,
Yeah.
throw the wheels away. They are shot because if you try to use a used wheel, more than likely it's not on the car because it's loose. And he says people make that mistake. They'll get new hubs, put them on there, put used wheels on there, and now it's loose.
Again.
Yeah, and they wonder why it's loose. It's because you're putting a wore-out part on a new part.
So are you buying these or are you making these tapered splines back in the...
Well, you could buy them.
Okay.
Yeah, but unfortunately at the time, and this has been probably 35 years ago, they were about $1,500 for everything,
Oh my God.
for the wheels and the hubs.
That's no joke.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, that car looked like a jewel when they put all that new stuff on.
Yeah.
But
That's cool.
once again, you drive it down the road, you get out. Well, does it need oil? I have to check the oil because that car is not leak proof. I guarantee you. I mean, one quirky thing about it, it was a convertible, and it wasn't hard to get into the car if you wanted to steal it. Well, what they did to overcome that is they put the battery in the trunk and had a switch on the battery.
Kill switch. That's great.
So you had a battery cable was like 12 feet long
Hilarious.
going to the starter, and you're going, man, this is crazy. Of course, now the battery has to be all the way up to snuff all the time, or you can't get the car to start. It's quirky stuff like that. You accept that when you buy that type of car. But this project here reminded me of that. Now this guy is putting this back on here, but when you doctor up a used part,
Yeah.
sometimes you're getting yourself into trouble, and I'll bet you John Deere would tell you that. But then you go to John Deere and say, well, how much is it? And you go, oh my God, it's that much?
Yeah.
I'm going to fix it. Well, sometimes you back yourself into more work if you're not careful with it.
Well, and that's a good example because they've been, a lot of the big ag companies have been in the news over the last 5 years about the whole right to repair. And apparently on the new tractors, you can't even do an oil change yourself because you got to have codes and keys and unblockings and resets. I'm guessing this is off of an older John Deere.
Yeah.
And obviously a wheel hub doesn't need electronics per se, but nevertheless, an interesting thought of, but hey, let's make stuff work and last.
Yeah, and if you were buying a pickup truck, it makes it attractive to you if you could just go out there and take a screwdriver and a wrench and fix something and not have to take it down to the dealership and spend $500 to repair it.
Yep.
Or somebody say, well, it's the computer. And you go, oh, yeah. Right now, can you get it? Well, maybe.
Right.
Whereas if it's an old mechanical vehicle or a mechanical mechanism, even if you're talking about machine shop stuff, you know, a lot of people are attracted to manual lathes because if something goes wrong with a CNC machine, they feel like, well, I got to call the service man.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Well, it's $500. No matter what I do, it's
$500 to get to the shop.
That's
usually,
right. Get here to do anything. It's fine.
I know.
You're spending $500 no matter what. So,
okay. So what's your plan of attack?
what we'll do is face this off right here so we can set it on some parallels and not have to worry about whether we got everything in the right location. And then we'll take two of these holes and put them across from each other and put something in here.
Okay.
To indicate across, to get it so it's square, so when we pick up the holes, it'll know where it's at.
Yep. You'll probe those in?
Yeah. Well, what we'll do is indicate across there and just get them straight. Then we can probe one hole in, and then all the holes will be picked up.
Because I remember, it's been a while. You've got that Bridgeport CNC machine that has the Heidenhain. Yeah. It's got really nice probing.
Yeah,
options.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, you know, you can pick up one of these holes and say, okay, now there's 9 holes here, and it'll go, okay, there they are. As long as you know the bolt circle, now you could indicate in here and come over here and indicate this and get your bolt circle.
When you see casting type parts like this, if you were to probe a couple of these or measure these, would you expect to find this to be on a even nominal radius, like a 7 or 8 inch bolt hole pattern, or is it sometimes just all over the place?
It used to be that way, but it's not so much anymore because I can't tell you whether it's a metric bolt circle or an inch bolt circle. One of the companies I used to work for, they did a lot of odd bolt circles because everything had to be super high balance.
Okay.
So you never have 2 holes across from each other.
Oh.
And it balances better that way. 3-hole pattern balances better than a 4. And,
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, you know. So then you get up 15 and goofy numbers like that.
Yeah.
And these days, a lot of people don't realize they have the luxury of pushing a couple buttons on a computer and poof, there's the bolt circle.
Yeah. I'm in that club.
Yeah,
yeah. I'm in that club.
Yeah. Now, if you were, years ago, you'd have to get a pencil and a handbook out and go, oh, I got to figure what is all the coordinates on all these holes.
Right. Yeah.
Now, you don't have to do that anymore. Of course, we had help too, in a sense. We had calculators. The guys before us was even more difficult for those.
Oh, yeah, slide rule or whatever. I'll tell you too, if you're young or you're interested or you're hungry to learn, put it by your bedside table. Read 5-10 pages. Just skim it. You don't have to read it. We were using it yesterday at the shop because we were looking at what's the right tolerance for press fit of a bushing or a pin.
Yeah.
They've got a whole chapter on that.
That's
Deformation, the pre-guide, pre-hore, tolerancing.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. For folks that don't know, can you explain what a helicoil is and what you love about them and what you don't like about them?
Well, for one thing, what you got is something here that looks like a spring.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you can see it'll pull apart like that a little bit, and it has a tab in the bottom here, and you see there's a little notch right there.
Yep. Little stress riser.
Yeah, that you break that off.
Yep.
So what you're going to do is you take that and you drill this hole out to a larger size, not much larger. It'll take all the old thread out, whatever there is left. In this case, there's not much in there. So then you have a special tap that matches the helicoil.
Matches the OD of that, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's just like your tap. Like this would be a bolt that you've pulled the threads off of.
Yep.
Okay, and you're going to make and tap a hole with a helicoil tap, and you'll notice on this particular tap, it says,
oh, recoil. Interesting.
Yeah, you don't want to get this tap confused with your normal taps because it doesn't.
Because I'm reading 5/8, 18,
yeah,
but that's not that tap. That's the ID of the helicoil that gets installed.
That's right. So when we put these, drill it out and tap it with this tap.
Yeah.
And they have the tap drill size for it on one of these packages.
164s.
Good grief. Oh, the drill size. Okay, got it. Do you know what so is this is not a, say, 3/4 20 or 3/4 16?
You can buy some different than a helicoil.
Yeah.
That are made, that are solid, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And they're usually a size or 2 above that. Mm-hmm. So you're drilling these out even bigger. But what you do is you drill that out 41/64s. Tap it with this once you get all your holes located like we were talking about a few minutes ago. Mm-hmm. Then you take this and screw it down in there and it won't screw out. The thread, once it gets expanded in there, boy, you can't, but you break that tab off.
How do you break the tab off? With that insulation tool?
Or yeah. The insulation tool will break it off.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's it. Once it's in there, it won't come out, and it's actually stronger than the original thread.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, we've used, I think they're called Keencerts, Keen, and there's different versions of them, and there's different brake tang styles. There's stainless, there's steel, and they're all different. I'll tell you, sometimes they work great, sometimes they can be difficult to install, and it can be a little fussy.
If you're doing it all the time, man, it's a slam dunk.
Yeah.
If you do it once in a great while, be careful.
Be careful. Do a test part first.
Yeah. You know, and they're not necessarily cheap, but they're sure as heck cheaper than.
It was the only real choice here.
Yeah,
obviously.
That's right. You know, I mean, you want to put them in there, and it'll be strong.
Yeah.
But like I say, you got to be careful on rebuilds like this because if you, like I say, run your hand across here, this thing is like bacon, where that rim has been.
Oh, is that? Yeah, sure.
The guy that's having this repaired was asking me about the length of the helicoil. He wanted it real long, figuring it would make it stronger.
Yeah.
If you've been around shops a lot, you know that somebody smarter than me has went around and tested these bolts.
Mm-hmm.
So, the length and the diameter, it's been calculated that, if you have a 1-inch bolt, if the thread's 1 inch long, you're getting all you're going to get. You don't making it 2 inches long is not going to make it any stronger, because then the bolt's going to fail.
Yeah.
Now you might say, well, then I don't have to. I can take the bolt out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to replace the threads. You might go by that theory, but basically they're saying if you put a 1 inch long thread,
You're good.
you're good to go, and there's no point in doing all that extra if you're not going to do it. And that's why the helicoil is not very long, and that's what he was asking me. He said, well, why ain't they longer? Can we get longer
Right.
ones? I said, well, it's going to be strong as your bolts anyway. So
What's this?
the
It's
difference?
the logic I've heard as well is look at the length of a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch nut. It's about the diameter. You don't need a real or a long nut.
Yeah, that's right. It's not going to get you anything because the bolt's going to fail.
Well, and,
Yeah.
and if there's some really interesting videos that have gone into showing everything's a wet noodle, everything moves, and nuts moves, screws move, they stretch, the thread
Yeah.
stretches, and how that all. Again, this is actually all stuff in the machinery handbook
Yeah,
too.
that's right. That's right. You can look all this stuff up. It depends on how deep you want to go into it.
The other question that we get a lot from our audience is this kind of classic question, especially for the younger job shops, the guys that are just getting started, is how do you quote a job like this when you've got to buy what might be a $20 or $40 tap alone, and you've got to buy a bunch of helicoils. You may have to buy 10 pack of helicoils. You only need 6. How do you think about that when you're getting a
Well,
quote?
the first thing you got to know, you need to know how much the helicoils cost.
Yeah.
And do you have the drills?
Yes.
If you have the part in front of you, you certainly want to know if it has a problem like this where you have no surface to sit it on. Now you can, John was just saying something about putting blocks here, but I don't like to take any chances that one of them is off a little bit, so then it's tilted on the table where I can't see it, so it causes an error. So that, and I have to hone this out.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not working on it yourself and you got employees that are working on it, that can be particularly difficult because you've got people at different skill levels.
Sure.
What happens is, if I throw this up and indicate it in, you say, well, how long does it take to indicate that in? Well, it can take 15 minutes. And people go, wow, that's not very long for an indication. Well, that's because I've been doing it for 50 years.
Yeah, right.
Somebody that's just out of high school, when I go over to the school and substitute once in a while, I don't have any hair for this reason. And I have to harken back to when I was doing it at that age too.
Right.
But you have to consider that. If you're doing it yourself, you know how long it takes you to indicate something in, and more than likely you're going to have to indicate in and skim something. I mean, me personally, and I'm going to do it for this, but unless he asked me to, I would skim this off.
Yeah.
Which means I'm holding it here, skimming the back off, turning it around, indicating this end.
Yeah.
And skimming. You wouldn't skim this because this is what the alignment diameter for the rim.
Right. You got to know basics about tractors, and you got to know that you can indicate a feature on this. It's a casting that it's never going to indicate in because it's not round.
Yeah.
Chasing your tail.
Yeah, that's right. Or you 4 point is what we call it.
Okay.
You find 4 points you think that looks good there and here and here and here. And typically what I do on a 4-jaw chuck is just pick these 4 spots, and you want those to zero in as closely as possible. Then you skim it and you say, now it's clean.
Got to date them.
And then, if you skim this side and you skim this side, now your bolts are going to be square to where the wheel mounts, and it's going to be square everywhere.
Right.
And you get the best effect. Now that doesn't mean that this hasn't been. Now this was tight on the axle, so it's probably no error there unless he puts it back on there with dirt in it, which that's always a possibility.
Would you tell him to put like a never seize on that taper or something?
I think I just put a thin layer of oil on it because you don't want to interfere with the fit.
Yeah. Never seize would be potentially too thick.
You might get more on one side than you do the other.
Right.
And it's kind of like a grease.
Yeah.
Which that makes it come loose, but do you want it to come loose?
Well, at some point you might want it to come loose.
I mean, this is akin to what we were talking about with the wire wheels on the sports car. You've got a taper here. If it comes loose on the taper, boy, now you're buying an axle and a rim.
Yeah.
Or a hub, I should say.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that, and that's one reason I wanted to clean this out to get the best fit as he can get on here. And that means he's got to take responsibility for cleaning the axle off.
How are you going to run this tap? In the Bridgeport by hand with a guide, or in the CNC, or?
You know, you can run it with the CNC.
Yeah, you'd put it in a collet and rigid tap it.
Yeah, you can rigid tap it, or you can hand tap it. I can power tap it in a regular manual mill.
Yeah, that's what's kind of curious.
Yeah, you can do that too.
Got it.
If you got something to hold it with.
It's a pretty big tap. I mean, that's going to take some torque.
Yeah, well, it's a fine thread though. I mean,
Okay.
I've in my Bridgeport style mill, I've tapped 3/4 16s
Yeah.
power tap, so it'll do it. It's got enough. Now, if you got an old one that's only 1 or half horse or something like that,
Nope.
no.
Yeah, but that's what I think about a part like this. I mean, it's a bad day if you ruin that part or break that tap off.
That's right. That's right. You know, and you might, if you don't have as much experience as I do, or let's say you've got amateur status, I don't know what puts you into that category these days. You hand tap it.
Hand tap it, yeah. You get a feel.
Because you don't want to mess this up. Yeah. And this, you know, the CNC mill we have would snap this thing.
Like,
Yeah, you know, like nothing. But
Yeah.
you know, Bridgeport, it'll probably slip in the holder before it'll break this.
I say this humbly as I'm in the room with Paul, but when we are on critical one-off parts like this, where there's a next process is really important, like tapping and sensitive to the fit, I will grab without hesitation the gauge pins and make sure that drilled the diameter it's supposed to, because 5 thou difference on a drill diameter can really change the load on that
Oh
tap.
yeah, and it's in the handbook too. You know, you got to be careful about how small you make a hole in a tap. You know, you say, well, I want class. I want this thing to fit like nothing shakes. Well, I'll make the hole smaller. Oh yeah, so we get the tap in there and it'll just go bing, and that'll be the end of that.
Yeah.
You can throw the whole part over. You know, and what they recommend is pretty much where you're at.
One side, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to get a nice thread, you could put Foreman taps in.
Well, form down, you're talking about a huge amount of torque and a really sensitive pre-hole
Yeah,
diameter.
yeah,
And
yeah.
form tapping, my understanding is that form tapping aluminum can really help, but form tapping a steel, you're not gaining that
You
much.
bet.
from the
Well,
thread
you have
strength.
to really know your taps when you start and have a lot of experience forming.
Yeah, that's the other thing we use. We're so used to, everything in a modern manufacturing world is carbide. Inserts, end mills, drills, even are carbide, and you can just run. It's incredible what you can do with them. But most taps are either high-speed steel or called powdered metal, which is
Yeah.
still not carbide. They don't have that same amount of, and you don't want carbide in the sense that it's quite brittle.
Yeah.
But taps just aren't the same. They don't have the same.
Well, yeah, you know,
back-
and milling threads. You know, if you get over a certain size, and you know, I think you can go down to 440 in milling threads
Yeah.
or something.
Oh, we've seen
like
some
that.
guys do some crazy
Yeah,
256.
you know, and that's technically a lot safer than tapping. It's
Yep.
just a little bit more time consuming, and with some of the goofy looking taps that some of these guys are, you know, I think one of the German manufacturers is making a tap, it only turns one turn and you can take it out.
the
or
whole
something.
thing, the punch tapping.
Yeah,
The Mugi, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and, you know, I mean, it's really thinking out of the box. And of course, you've seen that with carbide tools or anything like that. That's stuff. It's constantly evolving. It's
Yeah.
a moving target, and you really have to be that way yourself in your shop. You can't say we're doing it this way. We've always done it this way. We're staying as this.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that. You constantly. That's why you go up to IMTS. You go up there
Yeah.
and get ideas and see what other people are doing. And you go, well, gee, what we're doing, and we can take that and apply it to what we're doing, and look how much faster or better or you know, easier it is. If you don't do that, somebody else will.
Do you thread mill on your Heidenhain with the conversational then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't-
Oh yeah, it's there's a nice cycle in there for conversational programming for that. I mean,
Yeah.
the nice thing I really like about that, we cut male threads on there with that,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
female.
Yeah.
It starts in the same spot, so when we go to put stuff together, it goes together exactly
that's
the
real
same.
slick. That's real nice,
Really,
sure.
yeah, I love that part of it.
Yep.
I mean, it just makes everything look the assembly look just
Yeah.
like the machine.
Okay, so I want to
but-
talk about the quoting though. If you,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
say you think it's 4 hours of work, whatever, it doesn't matter, and you've got your shop rate, whatever that is. But then do you sort of add on the cost of some of these one-off tools, or
Yeah, you have to.
you do?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, I didn't buy these.
You already had them?
No,
He provided 'em.
Yes.
Oh,
now you can go that route.
Sure.
Then your only thing you're concerned with is your labor. How much time
Yeah.
does it take you to put a bolt circle in and do some
Yeah.
facing work? And I have to say, you know, and you must have some experience if you're talking about one-offs. It's difficult
Yeah.
and it's expensive. And I've had people come in and say, how much is that? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, before you even ask me how much it is, can you buy a new one? How much does the new one cost? Well, it costs $300. Well, you better go buy the new one.
Then you get a new one.
Yeah, because they're using machinery like the CNC machinery you have in your shop and people have in their, at the manufacturer, where they're doing thousands of them. A human being might not even touch it until it goes into the shipping department.
Yeah.
And how much time they have in it? 15, 20 minutes? Well, I can't even think about repair.
Yep.
But so typically what you get in here a lot to repair like this is stuff you can't get.
Yeah.
And that's where you get into exactly what you're talking about, is you can't mess it up.
Yeah. Well, and look, we've seen that a lot lately with COVID and this whole supply chain stuff, which frankly I'm tired of hearing about. But some of the factories in our town have come to us and other shops saying, this part, I need it for my assembly line or production line, and it is 6 to 12 weeks or 6 to 12 months from Germany for $4,000. They just don't have a choice. And I think it's awesome. I think it's great to see insourcing and folks now realizing we need to invest in the equipment and the training and the processes, because frankly, if you needed to buy a slug of 4140 or something and turn this, you could do that. Wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, you could do it. I mean, you
get the right machine, no big deal.
Yeah, you're going to get a lot, but if you're making a one-off,
yeah, I know.
It costs a fortune to do all that programming and setup for one lousy part.
But if it's holding up the tractor that this is on is probably $200,000, and it's a field of corn that you got to get out of the ground.
This guy's in a hurry to get it done. There's no question about it.
And we're sitting here filming it.
Yeah. And he even went to a junkyard, and he said, the guy at the junkyard said, all ours are like yours.
Okay.
Stripped out.
Oh, good grief. Oh, man.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a guy was here about a case, a final drive and a case crawler.
Yeah.
You've got those two levers and you got clutches on both sides, and there's splines in those, and that thing keeps going like this, which loosens the spline up. Well, on the left side, or the right side, I can't remember which side it was, most guys drive it with one side and just hold one side still and just keep doing this on one side. Well, that makes one clutch wear out on one side, or one spline is in essence what it is, because it has clutch pads on that. And he came here to get that made, and I said, well, can't you get one at the junkyard? He said, all the ones on that one side are wore out, and there was a right and a left on those.
Oh, man. Oh. Well, I'm not a job shop guy anymore. I mean, cutting splines, though, is no joke. That's a lot more setup and work than just a bolt hole pattern.
Well, and they're different than gears. Because and then you were talking about fits. You get into, is it a press fit?
Yeah.
Is it a sliding fit? I mean, it's a whole category on its own.
You're not going to have a print, and like you said, you don't really want to be the guy going out in the field to test putting this thing on the tractor 20 miles away, but it's also tough to hand the guy the part and say, hope it fits, because the looser that is, the quicker it's going to wear back out.
Yeah, you can have the same problem, and you're saying, okay, I'm making a new spline, and well, I've got the old one here. What is the dimension supposed to be? Because it's shot.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just throwing darts at the board because I have to guess what the manufacturer machined that to. And if I just pluck a number out, well, if it's loose on the other one, then it'll probably fit. Yeah. But then you go, okay, now it's loose, like we were talking about earlier. Before you even get started, it's got wear in it.
Yep.
Did you really do anything for the guy? Well, if you can't get the part and the tractor's old, or whatever piece of equipment it is old, it's running. Maybe we need to run it until we can find something else.
Yeah. It's an expensive Band-Aid, though.
Yeah. And if you're making one part, you can get $500 in something pretty quick.
And does a guy like this, I'm being nosy here, does he know you? Did he just show up? Did he call you? Did you give him a quote on the spot, or did you have to spend some time to get back to him?
I know him for a number of years now, but I met him through George.
Yeah. Hi, George.
Yeah.
George made sure to wear appropriate clothing for today's video so as to not upset anybody.
But he initially brought a valve down here off an Indian motorcycle.
Oh, cool. You turning valves these days?
Well, it was a drain valve off the gas tank, and it had a triple starred thread on it.
Oh, wow. Well, that's not too bad.
Not for the CNC machine, it's not.
Yeah.
It's a piece of brass, and it has a packing gland on it, and it's underneath the gas tank, and when you go to start the motorcycle up, this is an old motorcycle, you open that valve up and we'll let the fuel run down into the carburetor and start the motorcycle up. Well, the thing was leaking like a sieve.
Now that you got to be able to buy.
No, you can't get it.
Serious?
No.
No one's even making.
No.
They've got this.
This motorcycle's not that common, so.
Okay.
But I don't know how many models they use the same drain valve on. But it has a triple lead thread, so when you turn it, it moves real far, real quick. So you only have to turn it like a half a turn. It's backing up a lot.
If folks don't know, triple lead threads, toothpaste tubes, 2 liter bottles of pop. It's pretty cool. You know, a full turn will go maybe a half inch of travel or something.
That's right. It travels a lot. And he didn't know where to get that made, and I said, "Oh yeah, we can do that." And we took it back here, and I made half a dozen of them.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Well, because if you make it for one, you might as well make.
Yeah, if you're doing all that monkeying around, and of course he was surprised we could do it, and then when we did do it, he could just put it right on the bike and get it going. I mean, it didn't stop the bike from running or anything, but what it was doing was leaking.
Got it.
Which, anybody that rides a motorcycle sure don't want the gas leaking on top of the engine or anything like that. And that bike, I think...
It's hot enough today.
Yeah, well, those bikes, I think that bike's out of the 20s or something like
wow.
that. Yeah, and it's something that's worth a lot of money, so you don't want to burn it up or anything.
Yeah. So how long do you think this job will take you?
Maybe 3 hours.
Yeah, start to finish?
Yeah.
And you'll have it on the lathe, the CNC mill, and maybe the Bridgeport, though?
Probably if I put it on a CNC mill, that'll be it.
That'll be it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
It'll take more time to line it up and do all that stuff. I mean, you've been, there it is.
Oh, that's cool. This is the...
Yeah, that's the valve.
Look at that thread. So 1, 2, 3, yeah. Cool.
It's not very big or anything. It wasn't a big deal, but he thought it was.
Yeah, that's great. But that is the essence of quoting. We've talked about this in our quoting video. Yes, you've got to look at what your time is and your costs are, but ultimately it really comes down to what's it worth to the customer. And I'll make up a number. If that job is going to cost $425 and he can go buy the brand new part for $500, probably I'll just buy the brand new part.
And that's the truth of it. I mean, unless the axle is damaged, then you're going to have to replace the axle and this piece anyway. And it wasn't loose on the axle; the wheel was just loose on this hub.
Got it.
But I'm cautious about that. I've been through that myself, where you try to patch something up and you go, well, how far do I go on this rebuild? Do I just go through the whole thing, or do I just? And then you go down the scenario where you're talking about, do I buy a new one and said just pack it in and just get a new one and put it on there?
Yeah, that brings up another topic that it came up with somebody that I was just talking about life with, and I think it's a concept worth addressing because it's frankly a pretty tough one, and that is what's called a sunk cost. And emotionally, it's super difficult to deal with, but the fact of the matter is, if you've put $500 and 2 weeks of time into fixing something and you reach a point where it just doesn't make sense to go any further, the right decision may well be to abandon it and move on, but boy, it's really hard to reach that conclusion after you get down the road. You know?
Well, we got something in here in the other end of the shop we'll glance at. The Bridgeport had a lubricator go bad on it, which is, they got those oil pumps on the back of the machine to pump oil through the machine to lubricate the ways and all that good stuff. And I was getting an alarm, oil pressure low.
Okay. This is on the CNC?
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, it's low. It's not saying it's malfunctioning. It's saying it's low.
Yeah.
Or the pressure is low, because it'll tell you if the tank is low.
Right.
And it'll tell you if the pressure is, apparently on that particular machine, it maintains a certain pressure level in the lines at all times. So it's always going, as it moves around, it's always getting oil in the ways. And so we get an alarm that the pressure's low, and it's got a leak on the pump, and it's leaking all over the place.
Oh, a leak on the pump.
Yeah.
I almost say better that than the line.
Well,
though,
it was leaking over the top. Now I don't know if we're past it yet, because we went and called Bridgeport, and of course that pump. I can't remember how many weeks it was to get to. You were just talking.
Can we go take a look at
it? Yeah. Come on.
Because this isn't that old of a machine, Paul.
You'd be surprised. Here's the pump we took off.
Yeah, like one of those Bijur style, or...
It's a Dropsa, which is an Italian-made thing.
Okay.
There's a pressure valve. That's in there on the desk, I think, George. You want to get it?
Coming out where you got your...
Yeah, where we got the And that thing, it was leaking like a water fountain.
Well, that's
Yeah.
easy to fix or
Well,
find.
we thought maybe it would be.
No.
Well, we didn't know if it was actually the pump because there's a bunch of wiring that comes in these two holes here. One of them's power line and the other one's control.
Okay.
And it's got wires that come in there, and we didn't know if it was a sensor bad in the controller
sure.
or the sensor bad in this thing. And I called them up and they said, well, we got a new pump we can send you, but it'll take like 12 weeks.
Yeah, we can't wait. 3
So
months for
when
your-
you see this wire here, we took this and hot wired, this is a sensor that senses the pressure,
Okay.
and put these across here so it was reading it had pressure and went ahead and ran
You
the
hot
machine.
wired the machine.
Yeah,
Paul?
and then it ran with no alarm.
Yep. But no oil.
Well, the oil was running out of the top as well as running in the machine because the alarm stopped in it. I guess it was,
Yeah.
Then we finally got the pump. It's the wrong pump.
Stop. Oh, good grief.
It's a model that's not quite as sophisticated as this one. So it doesn't have a feedback loop to
To
tell
talk
it that once when it runs,
Yeah.
the alarm will come up on the machine saying the pressure is low because there's no feedback on the pressure.
Right.
So, and then the machine will run and it'll go out and it'll just keep going. So, we've been using that until they get. So we were trying to get this.
Just that part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they haven't come back with that yet.
Oh, boy.
So how long that's going to take, I don't know. They seem to think they could get it, but they haven't. It's been a week. So they haven't talked to me.
Yeah.
Because we think if we wire this back up and put a new one on it, it might work. I said, well, can you get it? He said, well, he should be able to get it. The new pump you got, it's in there. It's inside the pump. But he said it's not mounted the same as it is on this one. Because they've got that sensor hooked up on it, and they don't have a sensor on the other. It just has a pressure valve in it. This machine it doesn't have a pressure gauge on it, but it has oil low.
Yeah. That's
You know,
nice.
and you really want that because you want to know when this lubricator is empty or close to being empty. It's usually not empty, but it's down low and it'll tell you.
Yep.
This particular machine will stop. It won't stop in the middle of a program. It just
Oh.
won't start the program back up. And it's an old machine relative to a lot of stuff.
Oh, is it a Tachasiki?
Yeah, it's a
Control itself?
Tachi-Tichi. And they had Fanucs on this, or Yasnaks, I think they were.
Okay.
On these as a generic control. This is the reason I got this is because it didn't cost any different, but it has a shop floor programming in it. There's a couple features that are a little clunky. It doesn't like a lot of face grooving.
Huh.
For some reason, you have to be real careful how you program that. And I've learned to lie to it and make it do a lot of things, and it doesn't know what's going on,
Yeah,
and
right.
it does it. Where
In the
pro-
conversational.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, like the triple thread that we were
Yeah.
just looking at, it just asks you how many starts you want.
That's great.
You know, as long as you got a tool with a rough clearance, it'll
Yeah.
cut 20 starts on there if you tell it to.
Adam Booth was up at one of our training classes and he asked, hey, can I knurl on a CNC mill? And there may be a cut knurling or a form knurling type tool, but I'm thinking, wait a minute here. A knurl is sort of just a multi-start thread at a steep
that's right.
pitcher. So we did a whole video on Infusion, but I want to say it was like 4 inches to complete one thread rotation, and it was a 25 start thread. And then we duplicated it and did a left-hand pattern, and it created that cross-hatching with a thread mill.
Yeah.
It worked great.
Yeah, that's better in a lot of ways because a lot of people pressure knurl.
Oh, yeah. That's
And
a
it
lot.
takes so much rigidity in your machine, and the room for error is much greater
Yeah.
than taking machine and stuff on there. That's
Yeah.
why I like the thread milling. Is
Right.
the company I work for, they would tap so many holes and just throw the tab away.
Yeah, right. Easier
And when you think about it, it's really a good strategy if you have people standing around studying. We can get 500 holes, and after that, statistically, the breakage goes way up. We're just throwing it away at 500 and putting new ones in there. And
Yeah. A couple years ago, our Sandvik rep brought by probably like a 3/16 diameter drill that was 40 times D, and it looked like brand new. It was probably a $300 or $400 through spindle coolant drill, and he just gave it to us. And I was like, just for fun, I was like, this is really cool. Why are you giving it to us? And he goes, because the company that uses it, they only use it for about 5 holes, and it looks brand new, but it's not worth it to them to run the risk, and they're probably making some medical application
Yeah,
that's
sure.
making money hand over fist. And so we got to play with that. It's kind of
Yeah.
fun. What do you got going on here?
those are nuts.
What's the material?
1045.
Okay.
What I need to do here, and I haven't had time to play with it, is you see I've got these set up in here to take the machine the other side. And what I have to do here is engrave these. And what I wanted to do is engrave here and then move here and engrave something different.
Okay.
And I want to do this 18 times, 18 different engravings on there. And what I want to do is put the program in there and then have it stop, take these out, put the next two in, and jump to the next new engraving.
Yep.
Well, the problem I have is this is an old OM control. I don't know if it'll handle it or not.
Have enough memory?
Yeah.
Is it a serial number or is it text? Like it's
Text.
different? Okay.
Yeah. It's real simple text, numbers.
Okay.
You know, if you put a 1 here and a 2 here,
Okay.
and then you go 3 and 4, 5
Yeah.
and 6, and on up to 18,
Yeah.
for example. What I want to be able to do is clamp it in there and then have it jump back to 1 after I get to 18 and start the process over.
Yeah, the variable programming on that wouldn't be too hard. But the variable programming to decide, and are you doing those as 2 different offsets? One's G54, one's G55?
Well, I can do them both either way.
Either way, it doesn't
Right
matter.
now, I've got it set up as one G54, and that's
Yeah,
it.
and that's fine. And I can show you how to write a loop that would go from 1 to 18 and then restart. But what you then do is, when it would call the loop 1, it would actually call a subprogram that would engrave 1. And then on loop 2, it would call a subprogram that would engrave 2, or something like that.
Obviously, it's a DT center,
you're
so
right.
they didn't go crazy with memory on it. You're drilling, tapping a lot of holes and doing some basic milling. It really doesn't take a lot of memory. Now, if I had to do over, I would try to get a memory like that monster has, because
Yeah.
that thing has got memory up the rear end.
No
I
limit.
don't think I'll use all the memory if I don't take anything out of that
Yeah,
for the
ever.
next 10 years.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, and I like that.
Yeah.
You know, that part of that machine has spoiled me like
Yeah.
crazy. This thing is like, if you get too much milling, it's like, hey, I don't have any room for that.
I always enjoy coming over, saying hi to Paul, catching up with Paul. And for folks out there that are getting started in this trade, find someone that in your community that's tied in with machine work that could be sort of a type of mentor, or a guy like Paul who's been around the block and has a level of wisdom that's been very for sure helpful. And it's been nice a few times to pay the favor back to help you out too.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome.
That's right.
Hey folks, take care. See you soon.